Hello, welcome to the YouTube channel of Christ United Methodist Church, located in the Owen Brown Interfaith Center here in Columbia, Maryland. My name is Reverend Angela Wells. My pronouns are she and her, and it's my absolute joy to serve as the pastor here at Christ UMC. Whoever you are and whatever your story, we are so grateful that you have found your way here to our YouTube channel today, and we look forward to connecting with you further. Christ UMC is a reconciling congregation, which means that we as a church have committed to the full inclusion of LGBTQ+ persons in the life and ministry of the church. We have also pledged to become an anti-racist church. Both of these commitments are a part of our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, striving to love God and neighbor in all we do. At CUMC, we celebrate Christian love that encompasses absolutely all people.
Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but they doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded of you. And remember, I am with you always until the end of the age."
It's been a long and heavy week. And I confess to you that I am really, really tired, body, mind, and spirit. But I'm going to try my best to unpack some of what happened at annual conference, where we are as a denomination, and where we go faithfully from here. As you heard in the report from Phil about annual conference, one of the biggest things that happened this year was the vote to allow 23 churches in our annual conference to disaffiliate, meaning those 23 churches are no longer United Methodist. But to understand what happened this year, we have to back up, like way up, like before I was born up. I'll try to keep this part brief, as I know, especially those of you in the Methodism class have recently covered this, but not everyone knows it. And so I think it's important to cover the basics. In 1968, the United Methodist Church was created by the joining together of the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren Church. So Methodist, United, United Methodist. General Conference is the legislative body of the church that meets every 4 years to create the rules of the church. And it was at our first General Conference after the creation of the UMC that someone from the floor of General Conference session moved to amend our rule book to include the words, "Homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching." It passed, and we and other faithful LGBTQ+ advocates have been fighting to change the rule book ever since. Christ UMC, this congregation, became reconciling, that is intentionally welcoming of LGBTQ+ persons, in 1997. We have every reason to be proud of the fact that we are one of the first congregations in our annual conference to adopt this progressive stance and proclaim God's all-inclusive love. Through the years in our denomination, there have been church trials of LGBTQ+ persons, as well as our ally clergy who have officiated same-gender weddings. But we, along with other reconciling United Methodists across the connection, have persisted in resisting this exclusive and sinful policy, much to the dismay of those who wished to exclude us. Every 4 years, General Conference has been a bitter fight about human sexuality. By 2016, things had heated up to the point that some were predicting a split of the UMC. But it remained unclear just which side would be leaving the UMC. And oh, so ironically, or actually very appropriately, the theme of that year's General Conference, which had been decided years before, was Therefore, go. The idea had been to base the General Conference on the Great Commission, that passage that we heard read from Matthew 28. But that theme, therefore go, sure took on some different connotations as it was hotly contested just who was going where and who was leaving the denomination that we all called home. The 2016 General Conference was a stalemate, and the only decision to really come about from that hot mess was that there would be a special session of General Conference called specifically to address matters of human sexuality. We would finally make a decision, so we thought. So that special session of General Conference happened in 2019, and it was disastrous. The delegates voted down the plans that would have allowed us to move forwards towards a more inclusive future. And worse than that, they doubled down on the exclusive language, making harsher penalties and severely limiting the ability of ally bishops to prevent church trials. At that same session, those same delegates who support the exclusion of LGBTQ+ persons also voted for an exit plan, a way for those of us who are progressive to disaffiliate, to leave the denomination, or at least that's how they thought it was going to go down. But they didn't account for how stubborn we are. And I say stubborn as a good thing. There is such a thing as holy stubbornness. Stubbornness as a spiritual gift of radical persistence and resistance. So we stayed. Queer and ally, clergy and laity, we stayed. And seeing the ugliness that happened at General Conference 2019, many moderates joined the cause for inclusion, realizing that they didn't want to be a part of a church that did such tremendous harm to God's beloved. So more LGBTQ+ clergy were ordained in direct defiance of church law. More same-gender weddings were officiated in direct defiance of church law. So why did and do we stay? Because this is our home, this United Methodist Church, as broken as it may be. We are Wesleyan to our core. We understand that John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, consistently broke rules to expand the reach of God's love and grace to people who had otherwise been excluded. He preached in the fields and the mines and the debtors' prisons to reach the poor. He allowed women to be lay preachers, something very forward-thinking for the 1700s. The entire groundwork of John Wesley's theology is based on grace. God's love given freely without condition or exception, not because of what we've done or not done, not because of who we are or who we aren't, but because of who God is. So we refuse to give up our theological home, standing firmly in the belief that we indeed are carrying on that boundary-breaking legacy of Wesley into our own 21st century context. And for me personally, I knew that change would only happen from the inside. If I walked away, there would be one fewer person to stay and fight for justice. One fewer person to work for a day in which little gay kids could grow up safely in the church. I wasn't willing to let those who wished to exclude me and those innocent children win. It's my church too. The church that baptized, confirmed, commissioned, and ordained me. So I stayed. We stayed. And that has made the people who wish to exclude us mad, quite mad. So mad that now they are leaving, using and complaining about the very plan they created, the plan they thought we would use to disaffiliate from the UMC. But now they find themselves using it to leave. So that's how we got here, to a place where 2 congregations disaffiliated at last year's annual conference and 23 congregations disaffiliated at this year's annual conference. An additional 38 congregations are in a lawsuit against the conference, trying to leave without the requisite payment You know, the one that their own exit plan had allowed the conferences to create. Now, to give you a sense of scale, like Phil said, we had just over 600 congregations in our annual conference when we started the session this year before the disaffiliations. So the 25 that have left last year and this year are a significant minority of churches in our annual conference. Many other annual conferences have had many more disaffiliations. A few thousand churches across the country have disaffiliated at this point. The exact number is in constant flux as annual conferences are meeting right now to do this work. Thousands of congregations across the connection paying millions of dollars to get away from those of us who dare to proclaim the sacred worth of LGBTQ+ persons. Just the 23 congregations who disaffiliated from the BWC this year will pay over $12 million to leave with their property. $12 million. How many children could be fed with $12 million? How many medical bills could be paid? How many schools could be fully funded? $12 million wasted to get away from people like me, people like us. After years of witch hunts, church trials, misinformation, accusations, and hate. Which brings us back to our 2016 General Conference theme on the lectionary text of this day. Therefore, go. Just go. I don't say that lightly. I don't say that derisively. I don't say that nonchalantly. I do say it exhaustedly. Therefore, go. It's time. It's long past time that we part ways to stop arguing about the same thing and get on with the work of being the church in a hurting world. It's long past time that we stop tolerating hate, sacrificing beloved children of God on the altar of the idol of unity. Today in the United Methodist calendar is Peace with Justice Sunday. Maybe ironic for the Sunday after annual conference, or maybe just perfect. Peace with justice is not an either-or situation. When there is no justice, there is no peace. Trying to create peace without dealing with injustice is a band-aid at best and complicit in the forces of oppression, sin, and death at worst. For too many years, the UMC has tried to substitute an uneasy, superficial peace without actually dealing with the injustices of our past. And I don't just mean the exclusion of LGBTQ+ people. Our heritage as a church is mired, just like our countries, in racism, colonialism, sexism, ageism, ableism. Try as we have as a denomination to sweep these injustices under the rug. Try as we have to claim that we don't have to agree to get along, that we could simply agree to disagree, as if human dignity was a matter up for debate to begin with. Try as we have to impose peace, to force sing kumbaya, to fake it till we make it with that first word of our denomination, united. There can be no peace without justice. There can be no kumbaya without a deliberate dismantling of all systems of oppression. There can be no unity without universal dignity. Just a few of the many interactions at annual conference to share with you. On Thursday morning, as Phil said, all the members of the annual conference, lay and clergy, were randomly assigned to tables to participate in what they were calling circles of love. At my table, as everyone shared what church they were from in our introductions, I immediately noticed that one of the people in my circle was from one of the disaffiliating churches. In the course of the conversation, once it came up that I'm queer, that member of my circle refused to speak anymore, wouldn't even look at me, which was hard because we were directly across the circle from each other. Now, thankfully, there were others in the circle who affirmed me. Thursday evening, after we voted on disaffiliation, a dear friend and fellow queer clergy member was approached in the hallway by a disaffiliating colleague they had worked with closely for years. "Are you happy now?" he sneered at them, even as my friend's heart was breaking because her own home church was disaffiliating. No one is happy that this is what we come to. But there can be no peace without justice. And as the bishop preached, love and abuse cannot coexist. Therefore, go. We cannot stay here, not one moment longer, not any of us. As the vote to disaffiliate passed, tears streamed down my and others' faces. It was a painful moment, but a necessary one. Some have used the phrase bless and release to talk about how we should treat the congregations leaving. If I'm completely honest, I'm not sure I can get as far as blessing those who have caused such tremendous harm, not yet. So for now, I'll leave that blessing to God. But I do release. And I hope and pray that we can truly release one another to go forth to live into the mission and ministry that God has entrusted to us. For decades, this conflict has been, at best, distracted us from, and at worst, completely undermined the ministry to which Jesus calls us. Therefore, let us all go from this moment, go from this place of pain, go freed to do the work which Jesus has entrusted to us, to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, teaching them the lessons of Jesus. For behold, Jesus says, I am with you now and always till the end of the age. This grandiose, God-sized mission was entrusted not to scholars or prophets or rulers in the center of power. No, this grandiose, God-sized mission was entrusted to a ragtag, hodgepodge group of timid, doubting followers on an unnamed mountain in backwater Galilee. This grandiose, God-sized mission is entrusted not to scholars or prophets or rulers in the centers of power. No, this grandiose, God-sized mission is entrusted to you and me. Our own ragtag, hodgepodge group of timid, sometimes doubting followers in this multi-purpose room in the village of Owen Brown. It's a big job. It's a job we could never dream of doing on our own, but we don't have to. This great commission was given to the 11 disciples. It's given to us together as a congregation, united with so many others across our Christian connection. And most importantly, it's given to us with the power of the Holy Spirit, the eternal presence of God promised to us by Jesus, with us always to the end of the age. So may we go, therefore, with joy. Maybe a little exhaustion too, for the fight to get to this moment has been long and hard. Therefore, go, exhausted, but with joy, to spread the good news to all nations, everybody, people of all ages, nations, races, sexual orientations, gender identities, abilities, and socioeconomic statuses. To make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, a transformation with peace and justice and peace for all of God's beloved. May we be a part of this transforming power of God's love.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new to CUMC, whether you are local or tuning in from far away, we would love to connect with you. Please feel free to visit our website at www.cumc.org. obic.org. Visit us on Facebook or connect with me, Reverend Angela, directly at angelawells153@gmail.com. As you move into whatever is next in your day, I invite you to receive this blessing. Beloved, you are made in God's own image. You are enough. You are not alone. Go forth with the blessing of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, to share the light and love of Christ in your community and far beyond.